Despite the action genre, Hot Fuzz can be identified as a slasher film with horror elements in disguise as a buddy cop film. The slasher is a subgenre of the horror genre in which the antagonist is a masked killer who could be anyone, and the film plays around with who it could be using film techniques such as subverting the audience with tropes. Hot Fuzz can be categorized as a slasher film despite having heavy action influences. This is because it uses tropes of the slasher genre and even subverts them, also using satire and other brilliant film techniques. So how does Hot Fuzz subvert the slasher genre? Simon Skinner calls himself a slasher when jogging with Nicholas Angel as a joke, the punchline being,
"A slasher of prices. My discounts are criminal,"
as he runs the local supermarket. But he is also a red herring, as he wasn't the main antagonist. And Skinner was constantly hinted at being the killer, such as when he always shows up at the scene of the crime to end up saying a related pun, such as,
"News travels fast,"
as Martin Blower was set up to look like he died in a car accident, which was one of the reasons Angel was suspicious of Skinner. Until Angel comes up short when Skinner has an alibi, which challenges Angel's will to keep pushing despite the lack of evidence until he finds out the truth that there's a cult of killers out to control the town for a greater good. This is a good example of dialogue and foreshadowing for what will eventually happen down the line, revealing the plot twists of the Neighborhood Watch Alliance. Similarly, this plot twist is also noticeable in Scream, as Billy was obviously being hinted at being the killer, that the audience wasn't convinced and it subverted expectations when it's revealed he was the killer, yet also was working with Stu. Just like how Billy was a surprise, so was Skinner, as he was revealed to be a part of the NWA after proving it couldn't be him because he had the alibi, which was his presence on tape during the times of the murders. Hot Fuzz tops this with a cult of members who worked together for their triumphant outcomes of covering up murders, which made it a harder game for the audience to figure out who the killer could be. Most of the film, Angel was having difficulties just trying to convince the people around him that these incidents are actually murders. This is demonstrated when the Andys make fun of Angel for thinking the accidents are murders and that it's probably because of paranoia of living in a big city as a police officer. Angel counteracts the Andys with great evidence.
There were no skid marks at the scene. Doesn't it seem a little strange that Martin Blower would lose control of his car and not think to apply the brakes?
The Andys are speechless and later in the third act are convinced, along with the rest of the squad, by Angel to turn on Frank during the shootout in the town. At the crash scene, Danny Butterman asks Angel why they have to call it a traffic collision and not accident, in which Angel replies,
"Because accident implies there's nobody to blame."
So later when Danny and Angel are having an emotional conversation about how Danny's mum died, Danny replies with traffic collision instead of accident, which shows Danny is implying his mother's death was an accident, as Irene Butterman drove a car off a cliff when Sanford lost the Village of the Year award after all her hard work. These scenes demonstrate great subtext of dialogue and the subject strengthens the antagonist's motivation. Angel's first suspicions of possibly more than one killer comes when Danny answers Annette Roper's question.
"No luck catching them killers then?"
It's just the one killer, actually.
Which is a callback to an earlier scene when she asks a similar question about catching swans instead. Once Angel's suspicions are revealed and there really is a cult of hooded killers murdering people in a town, it isn't for any of the smarter reasons that Angel thought, such as Skinner killing because of land value and removing competition for his business, but was actually all for the improvement of Sanford as a town, removing people such as Tim Messenger for reasons such as appalling journal articles riddled with spelling errors. And by killing people like Tim, they were able to make Sanford a statistically greater town by eliminating the bad and reporting his death as an accident. Frank justifies these actions in the memory of his wife Irene, who died from suicide after trying to work hard to make the town great. Hot Fuzz uses the slasher trope of an unexpected explanation for why the killer murdered, and the film uses great character motivation to justify such ridiculous reasons. Hot Fuzz clearly shares elements with the slasher genre, although hides most of it with its obvious action-heavy themes. Yet it's still considered a slasher because of its usage of familiar tropes in the genre that it also subverts. It satirizes and subverts the slasher through strong dialogue with excellent subtext in important scenes, which have callbacks later in the film. Edgar Wright has used these film techniques to illustrate subtle elements of the slasher genre and has subverted common cliches. In the end, it brilliantly brings these two varying genres seamlessly together to create a masterpiece.